In the bustling heart of the city, amid towering skyscrapers and neon lights, lived a young boy whose world was a constant struggle. His life wasn't filled with the luxuries most people took for granted. Instead, he spent his days wandering the streets searching for food, shelter, and the fleeting moments of kindness from strangers. He had no family to turn to, no friends to count on. His days were a blur of survival, each one feeling the same as the last, marked only by the places he would sleep and the faces he would meet along the way. For the boy, the streets had become home. He had learned to adapt, becoming invisible to the world around him. People passed him by, their eyes quickly sliding over him as if he didn't exist. It wasn't always this way. Once he had a life, a family, a home, and a future. But that was a long time ago. Now his only companions were the constant hunger gnawing at his stomach and the cold winds that swept through the city's alleyways at night. His life had changed when he was very young. His memories of his family were faint but still there. He could recall the warmth of his mother's embrace, the sound of his father's laughter, and the simple joy of being a child without a care in the world. But that world crumbled when everything fell apart. The reasons for his homelessness were buried in his past, too painful to revisit. All that remained was the boy on the streets, left to fend for himself in a world that had forgotten him. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city, the boy found himself in the back alley behind a bustling cafe. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods wafted through the air, mixing with the scent of city grime and wet pavement. His stomach growled in protest as he searched through the trash bins, hoping to find something to eat. The search was fruitless and his spirit sank even lower, but just as he was about to give up and move on, something caught his eye. Half buried beneath a pile of discarded napkins and empty wrappers, he spotted a small leather wallet. It was worn, the edges frayed from age, but it still had a certain elegance about it. Curiosity piqued. The boy gently pulled the wallet from the trash. He turned it over in his hands, inspecting it carefully. The dark brown leather felt smooth against his fingertips, a stark contrast to the rough, cold surfaces he had grown accustomed to. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do next. He wasn't a thief, but in his world, finding something of value, especially something like this, was a rare occurrence. The boy had never been one to take things from others, but hunger and the urge to survive sometimes clouded one's judgment. He could feel the weight of the wallet in his hands, the uncertainty gnawing at him. After a moment's pause, he decided to open it. Inside, he found a few crisp bills, a handful of business cards, and an old photograph. The money was enough to buy him food for a week, but it was the photo that caught his attention. It was a picture of a young boy, not much older than himself, smiling at the camera. The boy in the photo had an innocent, carefree look in his eyes, a look that reminded him of the person he used to be before life had turned so hard. There was something about the boy's face that seemed familiar, something about the way he looked that made the boy's heart race. The boy turned the photo over, hoping to find some clue that would explain how it ended up in the wallet. On the back, in faded ink, were a few words. "My son, 12 years old, always loved." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. The picture was of him. How could this be? He had no memory of ever having this picture taken, let alone it being kept by someone else. The shock of the discovery made his mind spin. His hands trembled as he held the photo in front of him, staring at the image of the boy he once was. How had it ended up here in a stranger's wallet? And who was this person who had kept it all these years? The wallet didn't seem to belong to anyone the boy knew. It wasn't the type of wallet someone like him would find easily on the streets. It was expensive, and it had an air of sophistication about it that made the boy feel even more out of place. For a moment, the boy wondered if this was some kind of sign. Maybe fate had brought him here to this alley to find this wallet, to find this photograph. Maybe there was something more to his life than what he could see in front of him. But the thought was fleeting, replaced by a sense of unease. What was he supposed to do with this wallet now? Was he meant to return it? And if so, to whom? He examined the business cards in the wallet, looking for a name, an address, anything that might lead him to the owner. There were several cards, each with a name printed in bold letters, but one stood out more than the others. The name on this card was simple, yet it carried an air of authority. Thomas Reynolds. The boy stared at the name, the unfamiliar letters forming a puzzle in his mind. He knew he had to do something with the wallet. It felt wrong to just toss it aside or keep it for himself. But what could he do? He didn't have the means to return it, and besides, he had no idea where to start. Yet, there was something compelling about the name on the card. Something about it made him feel like it was important. Maybe he would find answers if he followed this thread. He tucked the wallet into his ragged coat and stood up, casting one last look at the alley. The cafe was still busy with people inside, but none of them seemed to notice the boy who had just uncovered a piece of his past. He was just another invisible person in a world full of them, but for some reason, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just shifted, that the discovery of the photo would lead him to something bigger than himself. With a deep breath, he made his way out of the alley and back onto the streets. The wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of the city with it, but this time, the boy's steps felt different. He wasn't sure why, but he knew that whatever was coming next was going to change everything. The boy walked through the city streets, the leather wallet tucked safely inside his coat pocket. His thoughts raced, his mind spinning with confusion and curiosity. Who was Thomas Reynolds? And how had his photo ended up in that wallet? He had never met anyone by that name, nor did he recall ever having his picture taken in such a way. The more he thought about it, the more questions he had. But there was one thing he knew for sure. Something about this wallet, this photo, felt important. As he moved through the crowded sidewalks, his stomach growled again, reminding him that hunger never took a break. The thought of the few bills inside the wallet tempted him, but the boy resisted. He had found enough food scraps in the last few days to survive, but the idea of taking something that didn't belong to him still didn't sit right. He hadn't stolen the wallet. It had been discarded, tossed away like everything else that no longer mattered. But even still, he couldn't bring himself to take the money. He had to find out where this wallet belonged first. The evening sky grew darker and the city lights blinked on, casting a soft glow across the streets. The boy had walked through many parts of the city, but tonight he felt strangely out of place, like he didn't belong anywhere at all. He hadn't expected to find anything in the trash behind the cafe, let alone something that could potentially change his life. But as much as the discovery weighed heavily on his mind, he couldn't bring himself to go straight to the address on the business card. What if he was wrong? What if this was all some mistake? He found himself at a small bench in a nearby park, sitting on the cold metal as he pulled the wallet out again. The photo stared back at him, the face of the young boy so familiar yet so distant. It was like looking at a stranger, someone he had known once long ago. For a moment he closed his eyes, trying to remember. But the memories were elusive, fading like a dream upon waking. His fingers traced the edges of the photograph. The boy in the picture had a wide, innocent smile, the kind of smile that belonged to a child with no cares in the world. The boy in the photo wasn't him, or at least it didn't feel like it was. The boy in the photo looked like someone he could have been, if life had been different. If he had grown up with a family, if things hadn't fallen apart. It wasn't long before the boy made up his mind. He would go to the address. He didn't know what he was looking for, but something inside told him he had to follow this lead. It wasn't a matter of survival anymore. It was about understanding who he was and where he came from. Maybe this wallet, this photo, was a key to something he had long forgotten, or maybe it was nothing more than a coincidence. Either way, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in his chest that this was the start of something bigger than he could imagine. He walked through the city, the lights reflecting off the wet pavement, and followed the address on the business card to a tall building in the heart of the city's financial district. The building was sleek and modern, its glass facade gleaming under the streetlights. As he approached the entrance, he felt a sense of dread wash over him. What was he doing here? The building was far beyond his world, a place where people wore suits and carried briefcases, where everyone looked like they had their lives together. He, on the other hand, was a scrappy, homeless boy with no one to turn to. Still, he walked inside, trying to look as invisible as possible. The lobby was grand, with marble floors and large, imposing pillars that made him feel even smaller. He approached the receptionist, a woman with neatly styled hair and a polite smile. She glanced at him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked in a voice that was too formal for such a small moment. The boy swallowed, suddenly unsure of what to say. I need to speak with Thomas Reynolds," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The name had come out more naturally than he expected. I found something of his. The receptionist raised an eyebrow. Mr. Reynolds is a very busy man. Do you have an appointment? The boy shook his head. No, I don't. But I really need to speak with him. It's important. She stared at him for a moment, clearly unsure what to make of this ragged boy standing in front of her. But then, something changed. Maybe it was the earnestness in his eyes, or maybe it was the way he spoke, as though he truly believed his request was important. Whatever it was, the receptionist finally relented. Wait here, she said, nodding toward a row of chairs near the wall. I'll see if Mr. Reynolds can spare a moment. The boy sat down, his heart thumping in his chest. He had no idea what he was about to do, but he knew it was something he had to see through. Minutes passed like hours, and just as the boy began to wonder if he would be asked to leave, the receptionist returned. Mr. Reynolds will see you, she said, her tone slightly less cold now. Follow me. The boy stood, feeling his nerves tighten as he followed her down a long corridor, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. The receptionist led him to a large office at the end of the hall. She knocked gently on the door and opened it. Mr. Reynolds, this is the boy who asked to see you, she said, before stepping aside and gesturing for the boy to enter. The boy stepped into the room, his eyes immediately drawn to the man sitting behind a massive oak desk. The man was older, maybe in his mid-40s, with sharp features and an air of authority. He wore a dark suit, his hair neatly combed back, and his eyes were hard, focused on the papers in front of him. He looked up as the boy entered, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The boy stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure of what to say. Finally, the man set his pen down and regarded him closely. Can I help you? He asked, his voice deep and measured, though there was a hint of surprise in his tone. The boy swallowed and pulled out the wallet from his coat. He held it out to the man. I found this, he said. Inside it was a photo. It's of a boy. It's me, I think. I don't know how it got there, but it belongs to you, right? The man's eyes widened as he took the wallet from the boy's hand. He opened it slowly, pulling out the photo. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. The boy watched him carefully, unsure what to expect. The man's fingers trembled slightly as he stared at the photograph, his face changing as if he were seeing a ghost. Finally, the man spoke, his voice barely a whisper. How did you find this? His words caught in his throat. The boy didn't know how to answer. I don't know. It was in the trash. The man looked up at the boy, his expression softening for the first time. You're him, aren't you? He asked, his voice trembling. You're my son. The boy's heart skipped a beat. Son? Could it really be true? Was this man really his father? And if so, why had he never known him? The boy stood frozen, unable to fully comprehend the words the man had just spoken. Son. The word echoed in his mind, a sound so foreign, so distant, yet strangely familiar. He stared at the man, searching his face for any sign that this wasn't just some strange, impossible mistake. But there was something in the man's eyes, something raw and genuine that made the boy's heart race with confusion and hope. Could it really be true? Could this man, this stranger, be his father? The silence in the room stretched out, thick and heavy. The man, his hands still holding the photograph, looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face softened, and for the first time, the boy saw a tear form in the corner of the man's eye. The boy didn't know what to do, how to react. His mind was spinning. He had come here simply to return a wallet, never expecting that it would lead to this moment. But now, standing in front of this man, this possible father, he was filled with so many questions. Questions he wasn't sure he wanted the answers to. The man's voice trembled as he spoke again, this time more quietly. You don't understand, do you? He said, almost to himself. I've spent years looking for you. I thought you were lost forever. The boy's heart beat faster, a rush of emotions flooding him. What do you mean? He asked, his voice shaking. I don't even know who you are. The man slowly stood up from his desk, his hands still clutching the wallet and the photograph. He walked around the desk and stood in front of the boy. "I'm your father," he said simply, as if the words should have been enough to explain everything. "You were taken from me when you were just a child. I tried to find you, but I couldn't. I thought I had lost you for good." The boy felt his chest tighten, as if all the air in the room had been sucked out. He took a step back, his mind racing with a mixture of disbelief and fear. "Taken from you? But I don't remember you. I don't remember anything about you." His voice cracked, the weight of the words hitting him harder than he expected. "I don't even know what you mean. What happened? Where were you?" The man's face twisted in pain, and he closed his eyes for a moment as if trying to gather himself. When he opened them again, his gaze was intense, filled with a deep sorrow. "It was a long time ago. You were just a baby. Your mother and I, we were separated. There was nothing I could do. I wanted to keep you, but the courts gave custody to your mother. And when she disappeared, I lost you. I didn't even know where to look. For years I searched, but nothing ever led me to you. I had to keep going, but I never gave up hope." The boy stood there trying to absorb what the man was saying. The pieces didn't fit together. He had always thought his life had begun when he was on the streets. He had always felt like an outsider, someone who didn't belong anywhere. He had never known what it was like to have a family, to have parents who cared for him. The idea that he had once had a father, someone who had looked for him, was almost too much to process. "I don't remember any of that," the boy whispered, his voice distant. "All I know is what I've been through, the streets, the hunger. I don't know what to believe." The man reached out, his hand trembling as he gently placed it on the boy's shoulder. "I know, son. I know you've been through so much. I can't change the past, but I want to change the future. I want to help you. I want to make up for lost time." The boy stepped back, his heart pounding. He didn't know how to respond. He had spent so many years fending for himself, learning how to survive, how to get by on his own. Now here was this man, his father, offering him something he had never known, a chance at a different life. But was it real? Could he trust this stranger who claimed to be his father? "I don't know if I can believe you," the boy said, his voice thick with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can trust you." The man's expression softened, and he took a deep breath. "I understand. You have every right to be skeptical. After everything you've been through, I wouldn't expect you to just believe me. But I'm here now. I can't change the past, but I can offer you something better. I can offer you a chance to have the life you deserve." The boy was silent for a long moment. The weight of the man's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He had never had a choice in his life, never had the chance to choose a different path. Everything had always been out of his control. But now, standing here in this office with this man who claimed to be his father, he was being offered something different. He could feel the possibility, the hope, the fear of what it would mean to accept it. "I don't even know where to start," the boy finally said, his voice small. "I've never had a family. I don't know what to do with all of this." The man's eyes softened with understanding. "It's okay. You don't have to figure it out all at once. We can take it slow. I'm not going anywhere. But I want you to know that I'm here for you. I will do whatever it takes to make sure you have a future that's full of opportunity. No more living on the streets. No more struggling to survive. You don't have to do it alone anymore." The boy felt his heart twist, caught between the life he had known and the life he was being offered. The idea of leaving behind everything he had learned, everything that had become his reality, felt impossible. But at the same time, the thought of a better life, one where he didn't have to fight for every meal, one where he didn't have to sleep in the cold, was almost too good to pass up. The man stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "I know this is hard to believe. I know it's a lot to take in, but you don't have to decide anything right now. Just know that I'm here and I'll be here for you no matter what." For the first time in his life, the boy felt a glimmer of something that had always seemed out of reach: hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. He didn't know what the future would hold, but in that moment, he knew that he wasn't alone anymore. And that in itself was enough to give him the courage to face whatever came next. The days that followed felt like a blur to the boy. The whirlwind of emotions he had experienced, from disbelief to confusion to the spark of hope, left him disoriented and uncertain. He had never imagined that a simple find in the trash would lead him to a man who claimed to be his father. And now, that same man was offering him a future that was so different from the life he had known. But despite the kindness in the man's eyes, the boy couldn't shake the fear that this was all too good to be true. He spent the next few days in a state of numbness, unsure of how to process everything. The man, his father, had told him that he didn't need to make any decisions right away. That was the only thing that kept the boy from running away. The pressure of suddenly being thrust into a new life, one filled with luxuries he had never imagined, was overwhelming. How could he ever fit into this world? How could he even begin to trust a man who claimed to be his father, but was a complete stranger to him? The boy stayed in a small, sterile guest room in the large house that the man had brought him to. The walls were painted a soft, neutral color, and the furniture was modern and expensive. It was hard for the boy to believe that this was real, that this was his new home. The room felt too clean, too perfect, like a place he didn't belong. He had always slept on the cold ground, in dark alleyways or in abandoned buildings, his only comfort being the tattered blanket he carried with him. Now here he was, with fresh sheets and a bed that felt like it was made for someone else. But the strangest part of all was the silence. In the streets there had always been noise, people talking, cars honking, the hum of the city in constant motion. Here it was quiet, too quiet. The stillness made the boy feel like an intruder in a world he didn't understand. The luxury of the house made him feel like he was walking through a dream, but at the same time he couldn't fully enjoy it. He was waiting for the moment when it would all disappear, when he would wake up to the cold streets again. The man, his father, tried his best to make him feel welcome. He would come to the room every day, offering the boy meals, asking how he was feeling, and trying to strike up conversations. But the boy remained distant, his guard firmly in place. He had learned long ago that trust was something that had to be earned, and he wasn't about to give it away so easily. The man, however, seemed patient, not pushing the boy, but instead giving him the space he needed. One day, the man invited the boy to join him for lunch. The boy hesitated, unsure of what to expect. But the man insisted, so the boy reluctantly agreed. They sat at a large dining table, and the food that was placed before him was unlike anything the boy had ever seen. The man's housekeeper had prepared a gourmet meal, and it smelled delicious. But the boy didn't know where to begin. He felt awkward, out of place, as he sat across from the man who claimed to be his father. The man watched him for a moment, then spoke softly. "I know this is a lot to take in. I'm not expecting you to trust me right away. But I want you to know that I'm here for you no matter what. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." The boy nodded but didn't say anything. He didn't know how to respond. The man's words were kind, but they didn't erase the years of pain and loneliness the boy had experienced. The boy had learned to survive on his own, and he didn't know how to accept help. He didn't know how to accept this man as his father. The meal passed in uncomfortable silence, with the boy picking at his food and the man trying to make small talk. But the boy wasn't interested in talking. He just wanted to retreat back to the solitude of his room, where things felt more familiar. The man seemed to understand, and after a while he quietly excused himself, giving the boy the space he needed. Over the next few days, the boy spent more time in his room, trying to sort through his feelings. He couldn't stop thinking about the life he had left behind, the life he had fought so hard to survive. But he also couldn't ignore the nagging voice in the back of his mind, the one that told him this was his chance to change. This was his chance to have something more, something he had never even dared to dream of. One afternoon, as the boy sat by the window, looking out at the sprawling gardens that surrounded the house, he heard a soft knock on the door. He turned to find the man standing there, his face unreadable. The man stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I've been thinking," the man said, his voice calm. "I know this is all overwhelming, but I want you to know that you're not alone in this. You don't have to go through this change by yourself." The boy glanced at him but didn't respond. His eyes remained focused on the view outside the window, as if looking at the world beyond the house would help him make sense of everything. "I can't change the past," the man continued, his tone gentle, "but I can offer you a future, and I'll be here every step of the way if you decide you want it." The boy felt a knot tighten in his chest. The man's words were kind, but they didn't make everything better. He didn't know if he was ready to embrace this new life. The streets had been his home for so long that the idea of comfort, of safety, felt foreign to him. He had lived in chaos in a world where nothing was guaranteed, and to suddenly step into a life of certainty felt impossible. The man seemed to sense the boy's inner turmoil. "I know this isn't easy," he said softly, "but you don't have to decide anything right now. Just take it one day at a time. You're welcome here and you'll always have a place." For the first time, the boy looked up, meeting the man's gaze. There was sincerity in his eyes, and the boy could see that he truly wanted to help. But that didn't make the decision any easier. The boy had lived through so much, and the idea of trusting someone again was terrifying. The man took a deep breath, then smiled gently. "Whenever you're ready, we'll talk about your options. We'll figure this out together. You don't have to do it alone." The boy nodded but didn't speak. He didn't have the words to express how conflicted he felt. But as the man left the room, closing the door quietly behind him, the boy was left alone with his thoughts.
He had never imagined that life could be like this.
He had never imagined that he could have a chance at something better. But now, sitting in this room, surrounded by luxury, the weight of his past seemed heavier than ever. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he began to wonder if it could be something more than just survival. Could he really have a life beyond the streets? Could he let go of the walls he had built around himself and trust that this man, his father, could give him the love and care he had never known? The boy wasn't sure. But as the days passed, a small part of him began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could have a chance at something better. Maybe this was the start of a new chapter, one where he wasn't alone, where he could finally be part of something bigger than himself. Weeks passed, and the boy's life slowly began to shift. It wasn't easy. The transition from life on the streets to living in a large, comfortable house was jarring. He couldn't escape the pull of his old life, the memories of hunger, cold nights, and the constant fight for survival. But something had changed. The weight of the past still hung over him, but he could feel it lifting just a little bit at a time. He spent his days mostly alone, still unsure of how to navigate this new life. The man, his father, was patient with him, but the boy wasn't ready to dive into the relationship. Every time the man tried to reach out, offering advice or company, the boy would retreat. He didn't know how to be part of a family. He didn't know what it meant to be cared for or protected. All he knew was how to take care of himself. And even though the man said he was there for him, the boy still felt like an outsider in his own life. The house, with its soft carpets, polished furniture, and perfectly manicured gardens, felt like something out of a dream. He had never seen anything like it before. But the boy never allowed himself to feel too comfortable. He would wander the house, staring at the walls, unsure of where he belonged. He often found himself thinking about the streets, about the people he used to meet, the other homeless kids, the faces that were just like his, all lost in the same way. He remembered their struggles, their bond over survival. He missed them in a strange way. They had been his family, even if they weren't his blood. The boy wasn't ready to leave them behind. He wasn't sure he ever would be, but something changed one afternoon. The man, his father, invited him to the office. It wasn't the first time he'd been invited, but this time felt different. It wasn't about a meal or a conversation about trust. It was something else. The boy hesitated, unsure if he wanted to go, but something tugged at him and he agreed. The office was filled with the same sleek, polished elegance as the rest of the house. The boy stepped in and sat across from the man at a large wooden desk. The man didn't say anything right away. Instead, he just looked at the boy for a moment as though weighing something. "I know you've been quiet lately," the man began, his voice steady. "I understand that this is all a lot for you. I know you're not used to this kind of life. But I want you to know that you have options now. You don't have to live in fear anymore. You have a chance to build something you can be proud of." The boy stayed silent, not sure how to respond. The words felt so foreign to him. He had always lived in survival mode, never thinking about the future. The idea of a future, of anything beyond the next meal or the next place to sleep, was new and terrifying. He had never allowed himself to dream, not when he was struggling to make it through the day. The man continued, his voice filled with a quiet urgency. "You're not alone anymore. I know it's hard to trust, but I'm here. I want to help you find your way. I can give you the opportunities I never had. You don't have to be afraid of the world anymore. The boy listened, but it was hard for him to believe. He wanted to trust the man, but the fear of losing himself in this new life held him back. For so long he had defined himself by his struggle. The streets had shaped him. It was all he knew. "I'm not asking you to change overnight," the man said, as if reading the boy's thoughts. "I just want to give you a chance. I can offer you an education, a future. I can help you learn a trade, give you the tools to make something of yourself. You don't have to go back to that life. I'm offering you a chance to be something more." The boy's heart pounded. Education, a trade, a future, it all sounded so unreal. He had always been told that he would amount to nothing, that he would always be stuck in the cycle of poverty and struggle. But now, sitting across from this man, the idea of something more seemed possible. "I don't know if I can," the boy said, his voice quiet. "I don't know how to live like this. I don't know how to be normal." The man's gaze softened and he leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to try. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I just want you to have the choice, the opportunity. The rest will come with time." The boy swallowed hard, the weight of the man's words pressing down on him. He didn't know if he was ready to change. The fear of failure gripped him tightly, but something inside him stirred. Maybe, just maybe, he was worth the chance. Maybe this wasn't a dream. Maybe this was his opportunity to change his life. "I'll try," the boy said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try." The man smiled, a look of pride in his eyes. "That's all I ask. We'll take it one step at a time." From that moment on, things began to shift. The boy's father started showing him the ropes. He took the boy to school, helped him get enrolled in classes, and even began teaching him some of the business skills that had made him successful. The boy was overwhelmed, but he slowly began to understand the world he had never known. It wasn't easy. He still felt like an outsider in the classrooms, and the work was harder than anything he had ever done. But each day he felt a little more like he belonged. The boy still struggled with the idea of having a family. He wasn't used to being cared for, and the idea of trusting the man who claimed to be his father didn't come easily. But he could feel the difference. Every time the man smiled at him, every time he offered a word of encouragement, the boy felt a small spark of hope. It was new, but it was real. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at school, the boy returned home to find his father waiting for him in the living room. The man looked up and smiled warmly as the boy entered. "How was school today?" he asked. The boy hesitated before answering, unsure how to explain his feelings. "It was hard," he admitted, "but I'm trying." "That's all I can ask," the man said gently. "You're doing great. I'm proud of you." The boy's heart swelled, though he didn't say anything. He wasn't used to hearing those words. But for the first time in his life, they felt like they meant something. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living, learning, growing. The boy didn't know where his path would lead, but for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that it could lead somewhere better, somewhere safe, somewhere full of possibility. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the boy's life continued to change. He wasn't the same person he had been when he first stepped into the man's house. He still had a long way to go, but with each new step, he felt a little more like he belonged. He was no longer the homeless boy scavenging through trash. He was someone with a future, someone who was learning to believe in himself. And for the first time, the boy realized that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cold as he had always thought. Maybe with the right people, the right chances, the right support, he could finally have the life he had always dreamed of.